In November 1956, the most powerful empire in human history surrendered, not to a foreign army, not to a violent revolution. They surrendered to a phone call. In just 11 days, the British Empire, a superpower that controlled a quarter of the earth, was brought to its knees by its own debt. They were bankrupted by the exact same financial mistakes the United States is making today. The warning signs are identical. The arrogance is identical. And by 2026, the math says America's time is up. How did the world's unquestioned superpower lose everything in less than 2 weeks? And more importantly, what happens when America hits that exact same tripwire? In 1914, Britain was the undisputed master of the planet. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. If you wanted to do international business, you used pounds. Their navy was untouchable. They forced the world to trade on their terms. Sound familiar? But then came World War I. Britain funded the war with debt. By 1918, the war was costing them £9 million a single day. Their national debt exploded from £650 million to £7.4 billion. In just 4 years, Britain went from the world's largest creditor to the world's largest debtor. They owed it all to the United States. The system was broken. The wealth was gone. But Britain refused to accept reality, which leads us to the deadliest mistake an empire can make. Empires never die quietly. They pretend they are still strong. In 1925, Britain made a fatal error. They returned the pound to the gold standard at the exact pre-war exchange rate. They wanted the world to believe nothing had changed. It was pure ego. The result was economic strangulation. Unemployment skyrocketed. British exports crashed. Speculators attacked the pound because the math simply didn't add up. Britain was essentially bankrupt, running trade deficits year after year, yet pretending reputation alone would save them. They kept spending on a global military presence they could no longer afford. To keep the illusion alive, Britain forced its colonies to hold their financial reserves in pounds. They held their own empire hostage to prop up a failing currency. Then came World War II. The debt grew even faster. By 1945, Britain owed more money than its entire economy produced in a year. Their debt-to-GDP ratio crossed 200%. America squeezed them dry. The U.S. supplied weapons but demanded British gold reserves, foreign assets, and military bases in return. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, the United States rewrote the global financial rules. The U.S. dollar became the world's reserve currency. America didn't just inherit the system, they took it. But British politicians stayed blind. They kept acting like a superpower. That arrogance set the stage for the final knockout blow. The year is 1956. Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain saw a threat to its oil supply and its imperial pride. Together with France and Israel, they launched a military invasion to take it back. Militarily, the operation was working. Financially, it was suicide. The United States did not approve of the invasion. President Eisenhower picked up the phone. He delivered a brutal ultimatum. Stop the war immediately, or America would dump its holdings of British pounds on the open market and veto Britain's emergency IMF loan. The panic was instant. Tens of millions of pounds fled the country's reserves in a single week. Britain was days away from a total currency collapse. In 11 days, the crisis was over. Prime Minister Anthony Eden folded. The British Empire took orders from its creditor. They didn't finish paying off their World War II debt to the U.S. until December 2006. The illusion of power was shattered forever. Now, look closely at those exact numbers, because history is about to repeat itself. America is running the exact same playbook right now. Not similar. Exact. America's debt-to-GDP ratio is approaching 120% and climbing fast. The U.S. government added over $2 trillion to the national debt just this year. We borrow $7 billion every single day just to keep the lights on. Britain went broke maintaining global military bases. America currently has over 750 military bases in more than 80 countries. We spend more on our military than the next 9 countries combined. We are policing the entire planet on a credit card. Britain forced its colonies to use the pound to artificially prop up its value. America forces the world to trade oil in dollars. The petrodollar system creates artificial demand for U.S. currency. But the world is pushing back. China and Russia now conduct most of their trade in their own currencies. The BRICS nations are actively building alternative payment systems to bypass the dollar entirely. The foundation is cracking. But the real trigger is coming in 2026. By 2026, the Congressional Budget Office projects that interest payments on the U.S. national debt will cross $1 trillion annually. We will spend more on debt interest than we spend on national defense. We will spend more on interest than on Medicare. We are the household drowning in credit card debt, where the minimum payments eat the entire paycheck. Before Britain fell, internal treasury officials begged their leaders to cut spending and accept reality. They were ignored. The public didn't want to hear it. The newspapers called the pessimists traitors. Today, former U.S. Treasury secretaries, Federal Reserve chairs, and Wall Street executives are screaming the exact same warnings. And politicians are ignoring them. They keep promising tax cuts and new spending. We consume more than we produce. We spend more than we earn. We borrow from the future to pay for the present. When a reserve currency falls, it is not an abstract economic theory. It is absolute devastation for ordinary people. When the pound collapsed, British citizens watched their savings evaporate. Inflation ate their wages. Jobs disappeared. The standard of living they took for granted vanished in a generation. If the dollar loses its reserve status, every American will feel it. Everything we import will cost dramatically more. Interest rates on mortgages and credit cards will spike. The government will have to slash services or raise taxes. The comfortable American middle-class lifestyle will become a memory. Britain's rot took decades, but the final collapse took 11 days. America has been hollowing out its foundation since taking the dollar off gold in the 1970s. We have run trade deficits every single year since 1975. The decay is done. The collapse will be sudden. Normalcy bias is fatal. Every fallen empire believed it was different. Every collapsed currency was held by people who thought it would last forever. The government is not going to save you. British citizens who trusted their government to manage the transition lost everything. Watch the warning signs. Watch foreign central banks reducing their dollar holdings. Watch the interest payments on the national debt. History does not care about American exceptionalism. It only cares about math. The British Empire's final mistake was believing it was too big to fail. America is making that same mistake right now. We are walking off a cliff, and most people are too comfortable to notice. The only question left is whether we will wake up in time or whether 2026 will be our 1956.